Welcome to the Ages of Rock podcast with your hosts Bill Algie, Dennis Talbot, and Alan Tate. We are three guys who have one thing in common, a love of rock and roll. Our goal is to talk about all things rock. We hope you find this show intriguing, funny, and occasionally highly opinionated. Enjoy! Welcome to the Ages of Rock podcast episode 13. This week we have Bill Starkey, founder of the Kiss Army, with us. Introduce yourself, Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Starkey, and that's really co-founder. My buddy Jay Evans is also in there.
I knew that there was a co-founder, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember his name.
Uh-oh, now.
Tell us a little bit about your music interest, obviously the Kiss Army, and what you're doing nowadays.
My music interest is quite large. I mean, it could be anything from Willie Nelson to Metallica. Concert-wise, I probably still get a kick out of Bruce Springsteen, U2, Tom Petty, and I'm always out there looking for new stuff. There's still good stuff out there. You just got to go search for it, and yeah, that's the way it is. And currently, I'm a teacher at Indianapolis Public Schools here in Indianapolis. I'm in, I think, year 18 or year 19. And recently, I've had a situation where my students have started to learn to Google me because they had found the Kiss Scooby Doo thing, I think, was in their Christmas stocking this Christmas. And all of a sudden, a couple of the Weisenheimers got an idea to just start Googling Mr. Starkey. And so when we came back from Christmas break, I was a celeb because my kids had seen the Kiss Scooby Doo thing, and I'm getting all these kind of crazy questions about, well, did they really do this, and what about those shoes they wear and all this? And I said, well, yeah, they are real people, and they do put out music. This isn't a cartoon thing. So I came back as somewhat of a celebrity after Christmas break this year.
Well, that kind of cut off the question I was going to ask. Do your students know about it, and what do they think?
Well, and it runs in spurts, because like right now, I'd say the last couple of years they hadn't. It wasn't that big a deal, but when Gene was doing Family Jewels, they were aware of it. Of course, when the band's on tour or something like that, they're not going to be aware of it. I don't think even their parents are aware of it. I just think this Christmas break, some kids got a hold of that Scooby-Doo thing, and it just took off. It was so funny. And, of course, I've got my brothers teasing me saying, yeah, well, you know what? Oh, and I think I was laughing because we sometimes I have lunch with the kids in my classroom, and the one kid was telling me how he had the Kiss boots. And he was telling the other kids with big eyes about how he was wide-eyed. In other words, he was saying, oh, and these guys are so cool. They even have their own caskets. And my brother laughed and thought to me, he says, yes, well, when they started looking up the condoms and stuff like that, he goes, Mike had called into the office, and I thought, well, so far it hasn't happened, but, it's been okay. It's just kind of neat. Well, I was kind of skeptical about the Scooby-Doo thing, but, now, if it reaches new audiences and gets curiosities piqued, then, it's great.
Did you actually watch the Scooby-Doo?
I have not. No, I have not seen it. Maybe I'll have to borrow from one of the kids.
Well, I won't spoil it too much for you, but I will say that, in my opinion, Doc McGee steals the show. He is hilarious in that video.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, he is funny. Hilarious.
I thought Don't Touch My Ascot stole the show. I mean, when I heard that song, I just flipped. I thought, my God, this can't be Kiss. And then I thought, it is Kiss. And it just, talk about just throwing you a curveball. I mean, who would have thought that? And it was kind of neat, because anytime an artist gets pigeonholed and all of a sudden you do something like that and people are going like, what? I mean, it was like when Kiss did Beth. I mean, it's like, no, that's not Kiss. So, yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. That kind of stole the show for me. But now after you're telling me about Doc McGee, I thought, well, hell, maybe he's found a new career here.
Well, you should watch it, and if you like playing drinking games, Every time they reference an album title or a song title, take a shot.
Oh, well, I was hoping like every time they referenced the Kiss Army, I would take a shot or something like that.
It's going to be faster for you if you do it every time they do an album title.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, I've seen it too. I thought it was pretty cool, actually. Me and my family sit down and watch with me. It was like shooting bamboo shoots underneath their fingernails, but I thought it was pretty cool. It was neat. I think that's the thing I like about Kiss is, people say what they want, and they've got, I've got all this paraphernalia crap that I've spent money on, and yeah, some of it's from, it's cheap and whatever, but
Right.
nobody else does that stuff, and they do it, and it's cool, and that's fun for me. I was at Meijer the other day, or well, not the other day, but right before Christmas, and they had a Gene Simmons Nutcracker, and I had that in the cart. I had that in the cart. I wheeled that baby all around the store, and my wife goes, "Are you gonna buy that Nutcracker?" And I was like, "Well," so I ended up putting him back because he was like 20. He was like $30.
I saw him of all places, a place called Garden Ridge, which sold a lot of knickknacks, and I got one for my boss, who, oddly enough, loves Kiss and is a collector, and he's like 20 years younger than me, and he loved it. I only wish I could get like a set of 4 for him. You know what I mean? But the Gene thing was pretty cool. I think it was maybe $15 or something like that. But who would have thought? No, that's pretty clever for a Christmas item.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty neat, and they had some of the ornaments too. But I thought it was pretty cool that they had that Nutcracker was something I'd never seen it before. I was like, I should have just bought it. I don't know why I didn't. I don't know. I guess Gene didn't. I didn't think Gene needed another $1.50.
He doesn't, but I don't know. I as I get older, I'm trying to just stay away from a lot of the collectible stuff because it's as you get older, you think are you going to take all this stuff with you somewhere? I mean, so you just you don't. You're probably getting rid of stuff more than you're accumulating stuff, and then it's like I don't know. And nothing against the stuff. It's just it doesn't matter if it's Kiss stuff or whatever. I mean, I collect a lot of Indy 500 memorabilia too, and you're like, am I going to take this stuff with me to the nursing home? I don't think so. So maybe get it to somebody who really truly appreciates it.
I think too.
So do you think since? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, I was just thinking about you're talking about the merchandising. I think too. People our age, the novelty of it has worn off. When we were kids and the bubblegum cards first came out, we were like, oh my gosh, we got to have these and got to have these. And Kiss has licensed and put out so much stuff over 40 years. It takes something really, really, really cool, for me to go, man, I maybe want one of those. Back in the day when nobody was putting out, no bands were putting out anything except for Kiss.
I don't think the only thing that I really like anymore that I always have to get are the books, and I've always been a sucker for the written stuff. And it's funny that I just finally broke down this weekend and bought Lydia's book, and it's always been on my wish list. It's just for some reason I just always did something else, and then when I found out that she was selling it at a special price, and with the 30th, or was it the 30th? No, it was maybe the 30th anniversary of their performance at a show in New York, and I just thought maybe now's the time to get it, and I did, and but I've always liked the written stuff. I like reading about the band. I like even if it's somebody's opinion, it's still fascinating. I think that the road life and when they were traveling and the shows they played and the things that happened just fascinate me because their rise to stardom was pretty rapid. I mean, but yet they went like from from obscurity to fame real quick. But in between there was just a lot of wild stuff. And I remember I think Paul said sometimes that it wasn't glamorous. It probably isn't, but to people like me, I find it just incredibly fascinating because of the way it was going. And so I mean, like the first time I met them in November of '75. They were at the beginning of the start of, the fame was really starting to kick in just right then and there.
So, thinking about the books, so you've read all 4, you've read the Gene, Paul, Peter, Ace books, probably.
I didn't read Gene's book and I didn't read Ace's book, mainly because I just read the reviews on them, what the fans were telling me. and I got Peter's book at first, and I just thought, wow. I mean, I felt bad for Peter after it because I didn't think it was a very happy book. And then, fortunately, I got Paul's book, and I thought it was the best one. And I'm not saying that because I was in it, because I was in Peter's book too, but I just thought Paul's book was more honest, and I learned a lot of stuff about him I didn't even know, and you just felt a little bit of empathy about some of the stuff that he went through, because you just figure rock stars are invincible, and after reading his book, it was probably the best of the four. And I probably didn't read Gene's because I kind of figured what I knew what to expect from Gene. I mean, now if Gene was doing a real tell-all book instead of trying to instruct me how to do marketing or business, it'd be different. I mean, I think, honest to God, this is funny. I think Gene and Paul both ought to write books about parenting, because I think they've both done pretty good jobs as parents, considering they probably weren't, given. I don't know how you say. They probably weren't given great parents to begin with, to some extent, at least by Paul's standards. Or Gene didn't have a father, but he sure turned out to be a pretty good father. And I think that you raising kids in Hollywood and they do it the way they do, I mean, I think they should be commended for that. Now, that's, to me, is, you celebrities and rock stars, I mean, they all have all kinds of issues with their kids, and it doesn't seem that Paul and Gene have that. I mean, Gene's kids have turned out pretty damn good, so hey, write a book about parenting.
Yeah, that would be that would be a pretty cool idea. For me, the Paul book totally changed my opinion of him. I always kind of felt like he was just his arrogance to me always seemed to kind of come across.
Maybe it was confidence more than arrogance. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's probably true. That's probably it. But when I read that book, and I couldn't put it down. I mean, I literally couldn't put it down. And learning about his home life and the struggles and that he had, and then trying to keep the band together at different times, and bottom line is, none of us would be sitting here today talking about Kiss if it wasn't for Paul Stanley.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it would have been dead a long time ago. And it totally changed everything I thought about him. And I was a huge Gene fan because I liked the character, and I still love the character. I love the character more. But the person, I'm a Paul Stanley fan. Just true blue. Just what a great guy. And then we've met him. My son and I met him in Indy at the expo, and he was really nice, and it was just great, and it worked. It went really well. Actually, we met you two there, so it was kind of cool. My son's got a shirt signed by you that he's keeps hanging on his wall.
Oh my God!
But Paul's book, is surprising. The thing you were talking about, and I haven't read it yet. That's the next one on my list. But like Bill, like you were talking about, not reading Gene's. The problem is we know Gene's story. Gene's told his story through the years. I mean, every time he does an interview, he talks about his mother, and he talks about his upbringing and how. So he's been an open book. Paul has been the one, and Ace and Peter too, in a sort of a way. But Paul was the one that never opened up about stuff.
I might disagree to you. I think Gene's been informative, but I think he could open up more. I think Paul opened up more than Gene did.
Right.
And I think I don't know. I mean, and Gene has a fabulous story. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
right. But Gene kind of rubber stamped that book. I mean, what I was saying was he didn't say anything in that book different than what he's told us for 40 years.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? He didn't. There was nothing surprising or earth-shattering in that book. But Paul, I'm like Bill. For years, Paul was not one of my favorite characters because I thought he was arrogant, and I thought he thought he was a star, and he thought he was this. Not knowing that it was because he was shy and
right.
And that's what's kind of I like to see that part about it.
Well, and I feel. I mean, I don't think Paul's out of the woods yet either. I think he's still got a lot of things that he hasn't settled with, and that's fine. Hopefully someday he will. And So, but yeah, it was a great book, and it took a lot of guts to put a lot of that stuff in there. I mean, I laugh and tell people I was in the book, and compared to some people, I was glad I came out favorably. A lot of people didn't. So I should be quite thankful. And even though I really can say that I don't know him, and he really doesn't know me, other than what's been said in the media kind of stuff. But I was honored to be in the book, and because this book came from his heart and his soul, and it was nice to be included, and especially in a positive way.
Good.
Yeah, I thought So did you read the Peter book? Is that the one you said you read?
Yeah, I read the Peter book, and I don't have a problem with the Peter book. I just thought that, to me, I felt bad for Peter. I just felt that he came off kind of angry and kind of upset and somewhat bitter. And I mean, I'm thankful that I was included in the book and all that, but I don't know. That's just the way I felt about it. I mean, and I don't blame him. Because sometimes books are just a reflection of how you really feel at the time you're writing the book. And that's just the way it came out. But I just didn't feel with Paul's book, I felt that, he overcame a lot of obstacles and it had a happy ending. I just didn't see a happy ending in Peter's book. I just saw a lot of what ifs and woulda, coulda, shoulda stuff, and maybe kind of lashing out at people, and I just, it was unfortunate, and I feel bad for Peter and the way things happened and the way things ended up, especially with him and Ace. But I think truly, if things could have stayed, if they could have just kept their noses clean, they could still have been in Kiss, and we could have still had this. But it didn't, and I knew people who were working for him at the time that told me that it was just that things weren't going to work out. So I just thought Peter's book didn't have a happy ending to it for me.
Yeah, I made it through about halfway through, and I just stopped. I was like, he is so angry and frustrated, and it was just kind of this you owe me thing, and I just didn't. I was surprised. I mean, I thought I would learn stuff, and some stuff would get revealed, and all I kind of felt like was happening was just finger pointing and.
Well, and I felt that Ace's book was going to be a lot like his book, but for some reason it just seemed like Ace kind of fell short of telling us all the stuff that he wanted to tell us, and instead
he doesn't remember.
That could be true. That could be true. But I was surprised that Ace's book could have been a lot like Peter's as well, but it didn't. But at the same time, it didn't entice me to want to read it cover to cover.
I haven't read Ace's book.
I read Ace's book. I thought it too. Yeah. I just thought his was a little more. I thought it really was kind of Ace.
Yeah,
it was just kind of a little bit quirky and kind of goofy a little bit. And
I always tell people that before I actually met the band, and I was just a fan like everybody else. When I was looking at the down there like a paying customer, Ace was my favorite Kiss member. I mean, he was one bad dude. I mean, he was flashy. He was a great musician. I thought he was great. And honest to God, to this day, I've never met the man. Never met him at all. And I was always Gene and Paul, and then sometimes Peter. But before I met the band, I was a big Ace fan. He had it all.
Well, I've met Ace.
So Bill, being where you were, I mean, where you were, I guess. I'm trying to figure out the right way to word the question. As involved as you were in the Kiss Army in the beginning of that, and then some of that, involvement with the band. How did you not get to meet them? I mean, how did that work? Was it?
I had this funny theory, and then of course, I don't know that it was Gene's quote unquote job to entertain me the times that I was in town in the city and wherever we would meet, and I would get tickets. And Gene was really good about it. And I'm not saying Paul wasn't at the time. It would just seem like it was Gene's job. And he was fun. I mean, he was a great guy to be around. And I mean, I would come into the city, he'd feed me, and I mean, we'd go through some of my Kiss scrapbooks. I mean, and he was like a fan. And it's just the way it was. And occasionally Paul would talk to me, but Paul could have been wrapped up in the daily operations of the band too as well. And that's probably what he had to do. And there was a few times that I got to hang out with Peter, and some of the better times was fortunately when Lydia was around with him, because the two of them together was great, and she seemed to always be like a calming influence for him, and he was just the sweetest guy whenever she was around him, and they both had some great stories to tell about rock and roll and the things they'd experienced, and I cherish those moments.
Gene seems to me like, I mean, even though he's really business oriented, and all that stuff, he's like a big kid, though, isn't he?
He is, and back to the thing with the reason why I never ran into Ace is because he really was inebriated most of those times, and I think they kind of kept him from me. I remember one time we were in St. Louis, and they were playing two nights at Tequila Auditorium, and I was going to ride the elevator up because I was told by John Hart what floor the band was staying on. And when I opened up the door, Ace was lying on the floor of the elevator and just cackling away, and there was two guys trying to pick him up. So, he was already out of it then. Gene and Paul were never like that. Gene and Paul were always, it just wasn't like them to be like that. And now, what they didn't do that way, they made up for in the women. So, so be it. But, I didn't meet Ace because he just was always out of it, or maybe they were keeping him from me, which didn't faze me any. Drinking and whatever it is what it is. Mm-hmm. Gene is like a big kid. He's like a big fan. I mean, I always got a kick out of showing him my Kiss scrapbook, and unfortunately sometimes he would say something like, "Well, is this for me?" And I'd have to tell him no. And
get your own.
This is mine. And really, to this day, I'm sure it's nothing that he wouldn't already have. I mean, right. But I hear you. It was funny. You're taking your Kiss scrapbook and you're going, "Hey, Gene, look at this. I put this in there and all that." And he'd say, "Oh, I remember that interview and all this." And it was just funny. I mean, it was cool. And, I think there was a couple times I had some pictures in there that he even brought Paul over to look at. I think that some pictures were taken from an independent photographer, so it was stuff that they had never seen. It was done in black and white, and they were into that stuff. I mean, more Gene though, and then Gene was always into the underground fanzine stuff. Like if a local Terre Haute newspaper did something on Kiss, he'd always find that fascinating. And back then, wasn't swift enough to realize that I should have gotten a couple of copies, one for me and one for him, because he did like that stuff, and he always held on to it.
He always said he's Kiss's biggest fan. So,
yeah.
I mean, and that's part of it. I mean, you should be your biggest fan. If you're not going to be your own biggest fan, you're in trouble.
Well, and out of the four, I always found it fascinating. It seemed like whenever I would run into them unexpectedly, and they were either doing an interview or something, Gene would always want to put me into the thing about the Kiss Army story, and he was the only one that was like that. And I was always, of course, flattered by that. And I remember, again, in the St. Louis thing, and he asked me, he said, "What are you going to do tomorrow?" And I said, seriously, I said, "Well, I got to go to work tomorrow." And I took a day off from work to go here. He goes, "We're doing this thing over at the radio station, and you should come join us." And I'm thinking, really? And, of course, at that time, I didn't have a car. So, I mean, my mom was hauling me around even. And I kicking myself to this day thinking, damn, what would have happened if I had stayed that next day and done an interview with Kiss at that radio station? I mean, just stuff like that you're kicking yourself for, But you didn't know. You didn't know. I mean, I valued my job. I had to go back to work. I mean, I just couldn't just do what I had to do. I mean, as far as, you just couldn't just take off from work. It wasn't the way I was raised. I mean, I was lucky to get that one day off to go to that show.
Now, you spoke earlier that you met Kiss for the first time when they were kind of on their way up, on their rise to stardom.
Right, November of '75.
How long had you been a fan of Kiss before that? Did you...
Oh, probably '73 when I saw them on Don Kirshner's in concert. And I was really fascinated with their performance, and I thought they were an English band because the English bands were really big into the glam scene. And to me, I thought that's what they were because they just seemed so polished. And they seemed to me like an English band, and I thought, well, these guys really they can't be a new band because they just look too established. And sure enough, they were a new band. So ever since Don Kirshner, then I got the first album, the second album. I kept bothering my dad about it because his particular job at the time was he was an expediter for. He handled the Warner Brothers account when we worked out of Columbia Records in Terre Haute, and he'd always tease me about their lack of record sales. But the first album he got me, the first Kiss album, actually had the folded poster in it, and it's really, really torn up, considering the test of time and everything. But still to this day is one of my favorite Kiss posters of all time, and. So, my dad kept me up on the Kiss stuff. Of course, he always used to tease me about, he'd ship out a lot of Bob Dylan records or somebody like that, and he would always tell me that's who I should be listening to because that's what everybody else is buying. But it seemed like it never worked for me. I was a teenager, and I was a heavy metal kid, and I was into the Alice Coopers and the Mott the Hoople and people like that, and Kiss had all that combined for me.
Right.
So Did you see any of the other shows? Was there a Dick Clarkson concert? Any of those other episodes?
At that time there was only the Midnight Special and Don Kirshner was the only two that I remember that existed at that time. Dick Clark had his Saturday afternoon show, and he didn't do any. I mean, his was more of a dance thing than any of a rock and roll kind of thing. Even though he called it rock and roll. But those were the only two ways you could see a concert back in those days. I mean, we didn't have the YouTube, we didn't have DVDs or video. Concerts weren't shot. So when you went to a live concert back in those days, it was really, truly an exciting event because, you didn't know what you were going to expect. That's what kind of enhanced the whole concert effect. I mean, plus the fact that I think back in those days, Kiss was probably one of the loudest bands I ever heard. So you throw that on top of things, and by God, you got your $5 worth. I mean, when you left that place, you're going, damn.
Right.
I mean, I really saw a show. Well, yeah, there was one time, I think it was the third show Jay and I both went to, and we went to school the next day, and Jay's got this really twisted grin on his face, and he says, can you hear? And I'm like frightened, and I'm saying, no, I can't. He said, I've got this ringing in my ears, and Jay just kind of smiled like he just achieved nirvana or something. I'm like, no, this can't be, And eventually my ears came back, but it was through Jay's kind of double dare. Since it was his first Kiss show, my third, it was festival seating. He says, let's get as close as we can to the stage, and he wanted to sit on Gene's side because he was fascinated with Gene. And I just, man, it was just so loud. I mean, and I think nowadays it's surely to God there's probably restrictions and stuff like that. But back then there was nothing. It was wild in the jungle, man. There was, I mean, the pot was thick, the noise was heavy, people painted up, and I kid you not, I think the third show we were putting bottle rockets and shooting them off in the place, and nobody was doing anything about it. When you throw that in the Kiss pyro, I mean, yeah, it was like a circus.
Now, where was that show at? Where were those shows at that you were going to?
That was April of '75 at the convention center. And that was the first time I had known the band Kiss being a headliner. It was in April of '75. So that was even before the Kobo show in May. That was probably their big deal. Mm-hmm. So this was April. And it was kind of cool to go in there because I thought Kiss was pretty good the first two times I'd seen him as an opening act. But I thought when I'd seen him in Evans in April at the convention center that other people were catching on to this because there was a lot of people had their faces painted, which I didn't see the first two shows, and some people had designed their own shirts and things like that. So, and the convention center is a terrible place to see a concert because it's a convention center. I mean, it's got a very low ceiling, and it's very spread out. So I mean, like you're spread out. It's very kind of a narrow thing, and the bleachers can only go so far because you've got a low ceiling, and so here they come out with I think Status Quo opened the show, and they were tremendous. And it was also the first time I saw Rush, and they also were great. And I ended up buying a Rush albums after that. Right. So and then Kiss comes out there, and I'm not even sure they even played Rock and Roll All Night, because Dressed to Kill had just come out.
Must have been glorious.
Yeah, it was
It
great.
was, and I would never trade any of that because the spontaneity and everything. It was almost like a precursor to what you would hear on Kiss Alive, and that would come out later in September. I mean, it was that set list, and we took 2 or 3 carloads of buddies with us from Terre Haute, and I was the only one. My brother and I were the only 2 people that had seen the band, so we kept telling everybody, "You guys got to see this, guys. All this stuff happens." And I guarantee you, none of those people left that show disappointed. Everything we said was going to happen happened, and the Kiss Army was basically formed. So those 3 carloads of kids, we all drove back to Terre Haute, and that's when we started to go after the radio stations. We had believers. It was funny.
So being out of Terre Haute, did you go to? I mean, I guess you hit most of the Evansville shows too.
We didn't have to because Terre Haute at that time, we got everybody. We had Aerosmith, the Doobie Brothers, Aerosmith, Chicago, Leonard Skinner. And the cool thing was about it was that I wouldn't say cool, but the unique thing about it was that nobody really came close to selling out other than Elvis.
Right.
I mean, if Aerosmith or Leonard Skinner drew 5,000 or 6,000 in this 10,000 seat arena, it was pretty good.
Right.
But not a sellout. And what really irked me was that these guys were getting airplay that Kiss wasn't getting.
Right.
And I was, you get, back in those days, like a sports team, you got labeled by who your band was. And we would get teased by being Kiss fans because they'd say, well, Kiss sucks, they're not on the radio. There's a reason why they suck, because they're not on the radio. And it was really kind of hard to defend that. Well, Leonard Skinner and Aerosmith got played constantly.
Right.
And
Still do down here.
well, and maybe there's still somewhat of a bias. But that's what we were dealing with. And we were the geekiest guys too, man. I mean, and I was it was the worst for me because at least most of the geeks had straight A's, were really, really good students. I didn't even have that going for me. I was a geek with bad grades. I probably majored in study hall.
So when you see your students now, do you look at them and go,
I'm still better off than some of them, but I mean, but I had more going for me as far as a stable 2-parent household, and education's different now than it was when I was a kid. I mean, there was opportunities. I just didn't take advantage of it. A lot of it was my fault.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Bill.
You talk about forming the Kiss Army or Armony.
I didn't form that.
Well, you talk about the Kiss Army basically forming on that night. From the time that happened, how long did it take before you kind of got into the good graces of the band itself? And when did you start forming a more business-like relationship with Kiss? Or did you form a business-like relationship?
We still kept bothering the radio station to play the music, and what helped us was a obscure station by the name of WPFR opened up, and in probably the late summer, and they all of a sudden started playing Kiss due to the requests, and we were pleased by that, but they didn't have the following that WVTS had, and VTS was still our objective. Eventually, the WVTS jocks would call my house and say, hey, why don't you bring over your Kiss albums and we'll make some copies of some of the song lists, because the program director had trashed the ones they had been sent by the record company. So I kind of felt kind of cool about that, because at least they were a little open-minded that they were going to play my records and maybe give it a shot. And I think it was late September, and Kiss Alive had come out, and it was really starting to get some airplay. And so really, it was perfect timing. And I just, it's amazing that the timing and everything. And they announced that Kiss was coming in November, and they announced it in September, late September. And Kiss Alive had been out a couple of weeks. And Rich Dickerson, the program director who I'd been feuding with most of this time, was a very bright guy, and he just said, those stupid letters you guys were writing. He goes, why don't you write me about 2 weeks worth, and we'll read them up to the concert, and we'll call it the Kiss Army Letter of the Day. Well, like I said, the bad part about that was that Rich was pretty smart. I mean, he was like the Howard Stern before there was a Howard Stern, and he could get it by with saying just about anything risque on the radio he wanted, and there wasn't an FCC problem or like that. So I would write these crazy letters about, I truly believed it, that, Kiss was the best band in the world, and I even went after people like the Beatles and the Stones and the Who, and the bad thing was that Rich got he would always get the last thing to comment about the letter, and he would just tear us to pieces, and then that would be the Kiss Army Letter of the Day. And this was always read like from 5 o'clock at rush hour in Terre Haute. I used to run into people later in life that would come up to me and say, I used to come home from work and used to listen to that. But it was only on for 2 weeks. Well, eventually the Kiss concert sold out, and I guess their management people were pretty brilliant, bright people, and they had just finished doing the Cadillac, Michigan promotion. And when they found out that the Kiss concert had sold out and that Holman Center didn't have any other sellouts other than Elvis, they kept running around asking, what was they doing different promotion-wise that they hadn't done for the other bands. And the only thing they could come up with was, they said, some goofball kid named Starkey and his people were calling themselves the Kiss Army. Well, that did it. And then one of the famous funny stunts that Jay and I used to do, and of course we didn't have anything going on, is we would coerce our younger kids in the neighborhood to paint up like Kiss, and we'd drive them to the mall in Jay's car, and we'd like walk 10 paces behind them and look at the reaction that the people would have of these 4 kids dressed up like Kiss walking to the mall. And it wasn't even Halloween. And we called them the unknown soldiers of the Kiss Army. Well, sometimes we would take them to the radio station and try to get them to the radio station just to tease the disc jockeys who were there at the time. And by this time, it was October, November, and we were pretty much on good terms with the radio station, and Kiss was kind of on the rise. Well, the one night we went over there, Rich Dickerson's wife was all excited, and she came to the door, and we knocked on the door, and she said, Kiss found out what you guys were doing, and they want to meet you. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this isn't what I intended for this to happen. This was just to get Kiss on the radio. I had no intention of meeting Kiss. I didn't know what Kiss was like. I mean, when you look at the makeup and that and everything, I was afraid to meet Kiss. You had no idea what you were meeting because there was this mystique, and they were pretty dark. I mean, very rarely did they speak other than Paul. All Gene did was growl. So I was stunned. So I drove home that night. I was like, and of course, all the guys were celebrating and the high fiving and stuff. Of course, there were no high fives in 1975. It hadn't been invented. But everybody was just in a real celebratory mood, and I'm like going, wow, Kiss like this, and there's going to be a Kiss Army. Well, sure enough, on my birthday, I had came home from, believe it or not, doing a Kiss interview from the WPFR, and it was funny that when I did the interview, the guy promised me, he says, if you do these interviews, I can't pay you, but we got these 3 cool Dress to Kill promotion posters I can give you. And to this day, I wish I had never given them away because I think a couple of them were worth some money, and because they were pristine condition. And so I came home and the phone rang, and it was Mr. Alan Miller, and he said that, and WVTS told me that I was going to expect to get a call from Kiss's people, and that's when Miller and I developed a daily collect call relationship as to how we were going to promote Kiss's concert when they came to Terre Haute. And this went on right up until the show. And Miller was he used to work for, I guess, Nimbus 9, who was Shep Gordon, who was Alice Cooper's people. And I'll never forget one of the things he told me. He said, Bill, there's no such thing as bad publicity. He says, any publicity is good publicity. And the funny thing is, the guy was very demanding. I mean, there was a lot of stuff he wanted to do that I just couldn't do. I had fell short. I mean, I didn't have the transportation, I didn't have the knowledge, the experience, or any of that. I mean, like he wanted to pattern the Terre Haute situation right after Cadillac. I mean, he wanted to know if we could get the mayor involved, could we get a marching band, could we get everybody painted up? Because I could send you so many cases of Stein's Clown White, and we could do this. And in a lot of ways, I failed. I couldn't get any of that stuff to go. I mean, but I was a sick Kiss fan. I mean, I would have killed for the band. I mean, I was really driven, and I just, but what am I going to do? I mean, at that time, most of my Kiss Army comrades were in their freshman year of college, Indiana State or other places, so they had pretty much settled in. I was the only goofball that had no job, no direction, and what was I going to do? Okay, I'm taking these long distance phone calls every. Of course, my mom was annoyed by it because she couldn't understand what was going on, and I think for a while she really didn't believe me when I kept telling her that Kiss is going to sell out. This is going to be big. I still don't think she believed me, even when I told her they sold out, until she saw the marquee on the concert. So when we took a picture of that picture I still got in my collection, was pretty special to me because that was taken on my behalf because I don't believe my mom believed me.
Right.
It's always nice to tell your parent, "I told you so."
Well, yeah, because if you know anything about Kiss folklore and the other interviews I've done, my dad took me to my first rock concert,
Right.
which happened to be Kiss. My mom took me to my second rock concert, which happened to be Kiss as well.
Right.
So, and Miller and I decided to, we did whatever we could do for Terre Haute, and he kind of surprised me when he was able to get the United States Army to join in on the promotion, and another guy at WVTS, I believe, helped get Kiss the Key to the City, a proclamation from the mayor, and that was kind of nice as well. And they were pretty cool about it, and that's when I met the band. And then maybe a month later, Miller would call me and said, we want to thank you for everything you've done. And they flew me to New York for 3 days, and I went with Jim McGee, the Cadillac coach, and that's who I hung out with. And we saw the Kiss New Year's show, and were invited to the Kiss New Year's party at the Excelsior Club, which was a pool party. And I got my first interview, which was done by Mr. David McGee, who at that time was working for the Rolling Stone. And that was really kind of a trip for me because I never did any interviews until then. I mean, nobody actually sat down and said, well, tell me about the Kiss Army. And the unfortunate thing is Rolling Stone never published it. It was published in like a offshoot in the newspaper Rolling Stone thing that they did. So it was never actually put in the magazine itself. But I got a copy of it anyway. I mean, which was kind of cool.
Right.
I would go to a few Kiss shows, and then I think in March the following year is when I got contact from Boutwell Enterprises, and they told me that they had done other fan clubs, and they weren't familiar with Kiss, but they wanted to pick my brain as to what I thought of this stuff and Kiss in general, and they were up front and said they weren't necessarily Kiss fans. They were out in L.A., and to me, L.A. was never a Kiss area, unlike, the Midwest or wherever, Detroit. And I kept on a daily correspondence with them, and they were nice. I could request Kiss merchandise and get it without question. But at that time, there wasn't a lot of Kiss merchandise other than maybe one authorized T-shirt, a couple belt buckles, and there was a quarterly newsletter. And that relationship continued for a couple of years until I just basically got disenchanted and kind of broke off communications with everybody in regards because I wasn't being given, I guess, the same kind of attention that I was given in 1975, and that's understandable because the band was just rocketing to stardom to the point where they went from doing interviews with Rolling Stone to interviews with Playboy, which had nothing to do with music, but that's the kind of cultural phenomenon they had become. And, it was just a hold on for the ride, man. I mean, so, and that's basically how the relationship went to where it went.
So is that when things started kind of unravel then?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I would call Alan Miller and I wouldn't get return phone calls. And, tickets weren't always as available as they once were. the availability of the guys in the band wasn't always the way it once was. I mean, I could sense some tension, sometimes, and um, eventually I got upset, and I don't know if you guys remembered or heard the interview I did with Mike Brandvold in Three Sides, and I wrote what I thought to this day still was probably one of the dumbest things I ever did. Was I let a couple people influence me to the point where they said, well, you ought to write a grievance to the band and let them know how things are going, like how you're unsatisfied with Miller, or you're unsatisfied with the coin management, or you're unsatisfied with Boutwell, and let the band know directly. And then I did that, and I got kicked out of the show, and that was the end of it for me for a long time. So I mean,
So at the peak of it, though, Bill, how far in the circle were you? I mean,
Well, it depends what you call peak. Now, the peak for Kiss was about when I started to be booted out. The peak for me
the peak for you is what I'm saying. Is the peak for you?
I don't know what I would call that. I mean, maybe 76.
Right.
Because you got to remember when 77 was coming out, they were getting close to doing the solo albums and everything.
Right.
So I mean, it was.
But as far as like the fan club itself, I mean, did you have? I mean, I know that they said they picked your brain and stuff like that. But did you have any? Did you have a lot of say over any of that?
No.
Oh,
They would
okay.
throw things out there. No. No, and they were
Right.
trying to be nice to me, but yet there were times that they'd get shitty with me too.
Right.
And I would call them sometimes, and we would talk over the phone about stuff, and they'd ask me my opinion of this or something like that. But I always got this air about them that they weren't really fans.
Right.
And of course, and they also said that they kind of got tired of me complaining and would say stuff like, well, we really can't, be some sort of a sounding board for your grievances because we're in the business to do this.
Right.
And they would probably get, and I think there was a few times they said, we're tired of hearing your complaining. Well, my complaining was that it was in writing that originally we were going to run it out of Terre Haute, Indiana.
Right.
And I was disenchanted with my job and what I was doing. And
So it was never run out of Terre Haute in the very beginning then.
Oh, no. But I've got it in print that originally when we first met, I was always under the impression that it was going to be that way. And I felt that way months after the January show that Kiss flew me to. And I mean, Miller had mentioned to me something about getting a post office box and telling me that, we really needed to do this and that. And I was even told by other people that they had actually looked at warehouse space in Terre Haute. And I think if I have something that would really make me regret or be very angry, it was the fact that not one person sat me down and told me that it wasn't going to happen. I think that's just was real cowardly. I mean, the conversations I had with Bill Coyne and or Alan Miller. I mean, and I'm not saying that the band did or didn't have a hand in it. I don't think the band really had a lot of hand in it because I think they were just too busy being Kiss.
Right.
This is what was the management's job. But nobody ever sat me down. If they would have just sat me down and said, hey, you know what? I know we were going to do all those things in the beginning, like we said in that first letter. We can't do it, and we would prefer that we just send the Kiss Army out here to L.A. and let them run it because they've handled other fan clubs anyhow. That I would have appreciated that. It was the fact that it wasn't done that way, and then when I started to complain about it, all of a sudden I was portrayed as this. This. I'm trying to think of some of the terms Alan Miller called me. I mean, like I was an ungrateful. I don't know what. I was called a lot of stuff. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that
should have been common courtesy on their end, though.
Some bad. Well, but it's the music business, and you're reminded that it's not music friends. I remember I used to laugh. Eric Singer. He used to say that at the expos, and he's a good guy, and he's truthful about it, and that's just the way it was handled with me, and I don't know. I just wish someone had been forthcoming about it. But you know what? it's 40 years, and who's to say? I will give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying it would have worked. It probably wouldn't have, because I was still very green. And maybe when I had that one conversation with Bill Coyne on the night of the Kiss show in Terre Haute, maybe that was my job interview, and I flunked it. And they just thought, we can't do this. We can't. I mean, I know we like the kid and all that. I mean, he's a good kid or whatever, but he's just a kid, and there's no way. Because I mean, let's face it, there would have probably been a lot of on-the-job training, and they weren't willing to do that. Maybe they just thought that they'd give me a couple belt buckles and I'd go away. Far be it from that, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think I can't imagine the machine at that time in '76 and '77 was just running full bore 100 miles an hour and exploding. And I would think they probably had to do something. It wasn't handled right. I mean, definitely, but
no,
the other option. I mean, what other option was there really? But to try to, if they were going to do it the way they did it. So it's just, it's
well, and the funny thing was
difficult.
They would always claim that they weren't making any money off of it anyway. And Ron Boutwell, who eventually would also break off communications with them, he swore just the otherwise that they did do well money-wise. So I remember one time Miller got angry with me, and he said something like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to ship you out to L.A. and you can ship out posters or something? He goes, is that what you want out of this? I mean, just really mean-spirited crap that would go back and forth between us. But see, here's what's funny is that same spirit that started this Kiss Army, would be the same spirit that would eventually, turn the other way. Right. And I guess it was different then to them. I mean, so, no bitterness. I mean, business decisions have to be made the way they have to be made.
But it sounds like to me, too, though, it was more, not just, I mean, I don't think Gene Paul or Peter or Ace had this decision. This was all management and Kiss's, their people there. Because like you said, they're too busy out, making music and whatever, Peter and Ace doing what they were doing and Paul and Gene doing what they were doing, on the side.
Mean,
so, I mean, I'm sure
I do remember making a comment to Gene about it one time, and I think he just wasn't one of the best of the spirits, and he said something about I asked him about it, and he said it was out in California where it belonged or something, and I just thought, oh, well, okay. But it was just one of those days when things just wasn't going well between me and him anyway.
Right.
And it just that whole day was just a bad day for me. But you learn from this stuff, and but it happened, and like I said, if there was any regrets, there was regrets that nobody was forthcoming about it. I mean, I probably would have appreciated that, because I was under the stupid assumption that I was going to be running. I had a job, and I was going to work for him. But it was funny. Like I was I was a big fan, but once I met them, I became an even bigger fan. I just thought the world of them, and probably wasn't very healthy. You know what I mean? Because they were human just like anybody else. So just chalk it up as a life experience.
Well, after your time with the Kiss Army, the rise and the fall of Bill Starkey's role in the Kiss Army, what happens in the life of Bill Starkey after the Kiss Army? And
well, I
have a follow-up question after that.
I still keep in contact with the band and all that. I mean, because it was such a part of my life. But it was kind of funny working for Columbia House, and we were shipping out Kiss records, and I'd get teased about the guy who was the Kiss Army guy, or like I let something get away from me. And it was funny because I took it in good humor. I mean, then when they took the makeup off and Ace and Peter left, it was kind of hard for me to get motivated. And there was other bands, other acts and stuff to listen to. I mean, rock and roll still moved on.
Well, tell us about some of the other acts that you listened to after that.
Well, Bruce Springsteen was about when I saw Springsteen. My first Who concert was in the 80s, and that was incredible. My first U2 concert. Still went to a lot of shows. Still went to a lot of shows. It wasn't I didn't dislike rock and roll or anything like that, and I was kind of disappointed in Kiss because I thought at that time they were trying to be more like the '80s hair bands than what they were noted for. But to some Kiss fans, that's when they became Kiss fans, and that's cool. That's fine. Um, so it was kind of hard for me to see, what it had become. But yeah, there were other acts. I mean, uh, like I said, my first Who show, my first Springsteen show, and I saw U2 open up for Jay Giles at the convention center. It was funny, and they were almost booed off stage. So I kind of got a laugh about that. Went to a lot of Cheap Trick shows. Cheap Trick was a big Cheap Trick fan because of they were a Midwest band, and I just thought they had a lot going for them. And I guess I liked the fact that they had somewhat of a Beatles sound to them. Um, so yeah, there was a lot of stuff I was listening to. Well, and then as the late '80s were coming on, I was real big into the new wave and alternative stuff. I mean, the of course, it started in the late '70s with the Ramones and the Sex Pistols, and that kind of carried over. So, music was really important. I think probably back then too, in the late '80s, is when I kind of discovered people like George Jones and Willie Nelson, and I thought, well, there's quite a thing here about country music that I can see the connection with rock and roll and why it exists and why it has a following. So, music's always been something that I've fallen into.
Well, are there any new acts that you're following now?
I can't say that there are any new acts right now, and I'm saying that more in a regretful way because I just have not done my due diligence. I mean, I'm trying to think what I heard. Like I said, mainly what I've been listening to lately are reissues of old stuff that I had that they thought, oh well, there's a new reissue of Destroyer, or like I said the other day, I picked up Springsteen's The River, which was a reissue because I never cared for the production on it, and supposedly the production on this one was supposed to be a little bit better, but I haven't yet be able to find that difference. To me, it sounds pretty much like the original River when it came out. So, but no, I try to keep an open mind for a lot of stuff because I don't want to be like the 80-year-old guy that says, "Oh, back in my day, our music was better than yours, and everything today sucks." I mean, I don't want to be like that. I want to be open-minded about a lot of this stuff.
So in the classroom setting, then, thinking about that, do you think you've turned some kids on to Kiss?
No, but the times I've been able to bring my acoustic guitar in, and we've done like when we did Christmas stuff and all that, there's been a fascination. And I've always told some of the teachers, I said, see, these kids are just a product of their environment. I said, they're into hip hop because that's all they've heard. And they've never been exposed to anything else. And once they're exposed to something else, it opens up a whole new different world for them. So, as a matter of fact, that they conned me into playing Feliz Navidad at our holiday program, and it was funny, and I botched some of it up. But afterwards, there was enough people that came up to me afterwards, and it was funny. It was all these guitar questions, and I'm thinking, well, the guitar's been around for a long time, guys. I mean, it's nothing new. But again, it's what people are exposed to. I would be fascinated though if I ever brought my electric in and like did something with like a whammy bar or something and see what they would do. I mean, because again, I think it would be a kind of a cool thing because it's something that's live music, something they've never been exposed to.
Do the intro to like Code Gin or something.
Well, yeah. It was funny. I got to admit, the other day when we were on a lunch break and the one kid was talking about the Kiss caskets and all that, and YouTube is blocked from our school, and it's for a good reason. But I was trying to look for a way that I could find like a Kiss video to put in just to show these kids because a couple of the guys didn't believe that Gene breathed fire. And then before I showed them just the still picture, says, "Now don't go home and try this stuff." I said, "This guy does this for and they were floored by the still pictures. So I can't imagine what they'd think if they saw the video.
Yeah. You know, that's the thing that we talked about this on the show last week. I think that, the cool part for me anymore is not the shows are the shows. They've been the same show, same set list for the last couple of years. But now I'm taking other people that have never went to see them.
Yeah, that's fun, isn't it?
Oh, it's a blast. It's, we went last summer and took a buddy of mine and he'd never seen him. And he goes, I cannot believe I've never been to this before. It will never happen again. Well, you got about 3 years. You better go.
A few years ago, I was in good graces, and I was allowed to go to some free shows, and I did just that. I decided instead of taking people that had already been, I tried to look for people that I knew and who had never been, and it was so cool. I took a football coach and his kid to the kids show in Cincinnati, and one of the girls felt bad for the boy and took him back into a meet and greet, and he did a fist bump with Gene, and I thought that was really cool because people pay for those meet and greets, and this girl she just felt bad that the kid was back here with us. Of course, me and his dad didn't care. We were just happy to be backstage and to be at the show, and she took him away from us and took him over there, and we said, "Where'd you go?" And he said, "I got to see Gene." And I thought, "Wow, it's pretty cool, kid." So, you take kids that have never been or people that have never been, and it's still a damn good show, So,
Kind of what I did to Bill this year when I took him to his first Foo Fighter show.
I
got it in.
I've never seen him, and I'd love to see him. I love their stuff. I think Dave Grohl's great, and
check him out on Spotify.
Probably one of the
I did it. Sorry. Sorry, Bill, I had to do that.
No,
they are good, though.
They're a great rock and roll band, and there's not a lot of great guitar bands around. Like, my brother's a big fan of a band called The National, and The National's a good band, but, it's not a band that really highlights guitars or anything,
It's good to get a good band. It's just like I said, a good guitar band. And Kiss was one of the first ones, or one of the big ones,
Well, I think they were a huge influence because I always looked forward to the guitars they would play, whether it be Explorers or Flying V's or Firebirds. If you wanted to know, if you wanted to see cool guitars, Kiss was the band for that. They probably did more for guitar sales than they get credit for.
Oh, Gibson, exploded because of them,
Oh, yeah.
One of the best.
Yeah.
Do either of you guys have any more questions?
I think I'm good.
Bill, Algie?
No, well, the only question I'd ask is, so today, where you at with the band now? You guys, everything pretty kosher and getting along pretty well?
I think everything's pretty kosher. I'm not. I don't know how to say. I'm just a fan, just like you guys. There's no special perks or anything like that, and that's fine.
You don't have a Gene phone where you can just pick it up?
I don't have a Gene phone or anything like that. Now, I've never talked to them on a phone or anything like that. Now I've talked to their lawyers and stuff, and that's been a good thing. They've not called me about anything negative, but I've never actually heard from any of them, and that's fine. What would you talk about anyway? My day at work and your day at work. Think about it. It probably wouldn't last. But no, I think we're on good terms. I don't sense anything negative. I think they still celebrate the Kiss Army and everything about it. Well, I guess you could. Yeah, they did a really nice spread on me and Kiss Online back in November for the 40th, and I thought that was just I was very flattered by it. It was an honor. Anytime you get connected with the band and something like that, it's an honor. It's not something you're ever ashamed of or anything you get tired of. So yeah, I guess you could say just by the way that the plug on Kiss Online that things are good. You can't undo the stuff that was done back in the 70s. It was 40 years ago. Things were done, and maybe they were done for the right reasons. So, I have no regrets, and I hope they don't either. So, like I said, as long as the band is as long as the fans continue to give me all this attention, I'm getting more attention than I ever needed. And people say, well, yeah, you're famous. And I said, yeah, so was Lee Harvey Oswald. So I mean, fame is, I don't know. It's just one of those things. But like I said, Kiss fans are incredible. And if you'd have told me in 75 that I would be close to 60 years old and we'd still be talking about the Kiss Army, I wouldn't have believed you. I just thought, I'm close to 60 years old, man. I mean, because I just didn't think it would even still matter. So I guess it's incredible that it does, and a good part of that is due to the band. So I don't know. I guess it's just one of those things. It's hard to explain.
Awesome.
It's cool.
Well,
Very cool.
That about wraps up our time. We try to keep this at about an hour, and we do appreciate you coming on the show with us, Bill.
It's been a pleasure, guys. I never get tired of it. I mean, Kiss fans are very unique people. I mean, it's just it's so amazing. They all come from different backgrounds, and they have different eras of the band they like, and it's just really cool. I get more attention than I deserve.
So does Dennis, but it's in a bad way.
Yeah.
Save that for another podcast.
There you go. And on that note, we will close this show out. Thank you all for watching and listening. We will see you all next week.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Ages of Rock podcast. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and most importantly, tell all your friends. Remember, you're never too old to rock. Until the next episode, peace out, folks.